Hello, and welcome to the first episode of An Interview with an OM. I'm your host, Alicia Bunce, and today we're joined by Izabel Zambrzycki from the Colorado Symphony. Let's jump on into it. Perfect. So, to start, do you want to give me a brief bio?
Oh, sure. Yeah. My name is Izabel. I'm the artistic general manager of the Colorado Symphony. I started what I would say started my career as a flutist for 15, 20 years. I got my undergraduate degree in flute performance from Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And then after that, I was like every kid who, graduates with a music performance degree and was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I was a good flute player, but not that good. And I knew I didn't want to perform for my life. So I thought, I'll try and be a conductor. So I moved out to St. Louis, it's pretty close to Carbondale, and lived there for about a year and a half. I observed rehearsals at the St. Louis Symphony and kind of was trying to figure myself out. And in my time there, I was there for a year. I worked at Starbucks. Welcome to adulthood, and to as a full-time job because I needed to make money. And then in the summer after I moved there, I was like, I need to do something music because I'm going to lose my mind. I knew that my life, no matter what it was going to be, it had to be around music. So I applied to assistantships and internships around the country at summer festivals as a librarian. I had done a fair amount of that kind of work in my undergrad, thinking, oh yeah, I'm totally ready to go to Aspen and be a librarian, which is hilarious now knowing the extent of what librarians do, because I could not do that. But I was lucky enough to get a call from Brevard Music Center, and somebody who is now my mentor, Jason Posnock, who is now their chief artistic officer. And he called me and said, hey, you don't have enough experience to be a librarian, but I would be very interested to have you as an my artistic intern. Most of the time, you should not take a job not knowing what it was. I totally did. I just said, sure, let's do this. And that was my first glimpse into being in artistic administration. So I fell in love with it immediately. I was working with some of the best musicians in the world and getting to meet, people like Joshua Bell and Yo-Yo Ma or Nate Fleming, and, I was their person, I was somebody who they called upon and whenever they needed something. And I created a lot of relationships out of those summers at Brevard, but then decided that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I saw what my boss did, he was planning these seasons and scheduling the orchestra and all of this, like, I want to do that. So I did that. I decided, I had a friend at Brevard who was getting their master's degree in arts administration. I also had no idea there was a master's degree in this. I decided to go to Florida State for my master's degree starting in 2014, 15. I can't remember now. God, that feels like forever ago. But I did my master's degree. I would not necessarily recommend that everyone do a master's degree in arts admin. I think that there is it's a fine line of getting experience, but also, understanding. The one thing I really did enjoy out of my master's was understanding an organization as a whole, not just my part of it. That I feel better for knowing that what development has to do and to the extent of what they do, and marketing, what that means and how they work. Whereas, artistic, it's very easy to get tunnel visioned because you're the product, right? Like, we're the one putting the concerts on. So after I was finishing my master's degree, my last summer at Brevard was 2015, and I met Jonathan Carney there, who's the concertmaster of the Baltimore Symphony. I happened to have just, created a great relationship with John. I did him a few favors of picking up his wife from the airport that I didn't have to do, but ended up paying off because about 7 months later, he texted me and said, hey, there's a job opening at the Baltimore Symphony, and I think you'd be great for it. And I was like, okay, I still have 6 months until I graduate. But I really wanted this job. It was artist liaison and assistant to the music director, who is Marin Alsop. And so I interviewed and I got the job. They hired me 6 months early, and I started working remotely from Florida to Baltimore. And I traveled about 4 times during my last semester of my master's to go work on site. And then in May of 2016, I moved to Baltimore. I worked at the Baltimore Symphony for about 2.5 years, and it was a wild ride. It was a crazy organization that was very dysfunctional in ways, but I think all organizations are dysfunctional to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But they were struggling. They had a very large deficit, and that culminated really right after I left with the strike that happened. So I knew that it was kind of time to leave. I was also looking for my next step. I had gotten promoted twice while I was there, and I was doing artistic planning, which is what I wanted to do. So, but they were hiring a director of artistic planning and decided to go with someone else. So I decided that it was time for me to find my next place, and that is here in Colorado. So I found this job and immediately applied. I didn't write a cover letter. I've never written a cover letter for a job yet. It's not gonna be good when I need to. And I interviewed, and I had people call, I had managers who knew me well and called my boss and said, you need to hire her. And he did. So he offered me the job, and I came here just 2 years ago. I celebrated my second anniversary on October 1st. So now we're in the middle of pandemic crazy COVID. So
yep.
That was a long bio. I hope that wasn't too much.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's actually super interesting because I also play flute and have done that forever. And then it's like,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm not the best player. Maybe I should do something else.
Me either. I liked it. Loved it. I miss it still. I do miss it, but I don't, it wasn't my life. It wasn't going to be what I did with my life. So
do you still have the opportunity to play other than pandemic?
No, I don't. I mean, I could if I kept up my playing. If I were still as proficient as I was, I probably could. There are certainly opportunities here. I mean, there's times that we need another flutist in the orchestra, and then we hire somebody. And if I were still a great player, I could do it. But I don't keep up with it. What really happened was, in my time in Baltimore, I was working about 80 hours a week. Being Marin Alsop's assistant is a lot. And it was well worth it, let me tell you. I mean, she is now one of my closest confidants and somebody I can probably call on for anything. But it was a lot. I just didn't have time, because when I was not working, I was sleeping, eating, or, just doing nothing because I needed to do that. So I just haven't kept up my playing. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. The director of personnel here, who manages the orchestra of basically their babysitter is what I call that position. He plays in the orchestra often. He's a horn player, and he's a great player. And he, in times of an assistant need, if principal horn needs an assistant and all that, he'll play, and he's very good. So people do it. It's not everybody does though.
Okay. So before COVID, what did a day-to-day schedule look like for you?
Oh, that's such a great thing to think about. So the weeks were really flexible because, the orchestra rehearses primarily Tuesday through Friday. Mondays are typically, for most major orchestras in the country, are off because we perform Friday through Sunday. So Mondays are typically the day off that people get. But so Mondays were flexible. I came in later because I am not a morning person. I'm not somebody who comes in at 8 a.m. sharp and is like, I'm ready. No, I usually fly in at about 9:30 every day. And my days would normally start out by starting at the hall, because we usually start services at 10 a.m. So I'd start at the hall. I'd usually, if there's a guest artist, a new conductor, I'd say hi to everybody. I have to go and make sure everybody's happy, healthy, good. Conductor, our music director, if it's our music director or anyone who's on the podium that week, I always go and I say hello, check in how things are doing, see if they have any questions for the week. And I do the same with any of the guest artists that are there that week, just to make sure everybody's kind of happy and comfy. So I usually, rehearsal will start. I usually always sit in at rehearsal for maybe up to 30 minutes, depending on what my schedule is. I like to sit down with the orchestra every day, because it reminds me why I do this, because it's very easy. Our offices are not at the hall, they're next door. So it's not like it's a far hike or anything, but people often don't make that hike to see the orchestra. And I think it's very important, especially in an artistic position. You need to know what that orchestra is sounding like all the time. And they sound different under every conductor they play in. So you got to know, how do they sound this week? What does it sound like with Brett on the podium versus, Christopher Dragon versus, somebody else, a guest conductor. So I spend time with the orchestra because it's important to me. After that, I usually go to my office, and I'm probably in meetings a good chunk of the day. I usually have meetings with my team just to make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing, and that they have the information they have. The most important thing to me is that my team has what they need to do their jobs well. So usually it's check-ins with the team, it's meetings with managers on the phone, artist managers. Oftentimes I'm talking to them, a few of them a day, just to check in, say hi, see what's new, and usually work on future planning. And booking artists for future seasons. So if I'm talking about, playing a Mendelssohn violin concerto and I want to get Paul Home to do it, I call Bill Capone and I have a call with him. And we say, hey, what's the availability of Paul? What can I, what weeks are looking good for him? And so that's usually my day. I do that until 4 or 5 o'clock. I leave, go home, and usually sometimes there's evening rehearsals, depending if we have a choir on stage. The choir's on stage, we have evening rehearsals. So I will always be at choir rehearsals in the evenings, at least to check in and make sure things are okay. And the schedule is very flexible because then naturally on the weekends I'm here, or not here, but I'm at the hall. For working the concerts, and we all share duty. There's a team here, and we all split. So not everybody's here for every concert. So because it's important for everybody to not be there all the time. So that's pretty much a general schedule for me.
And that brings 2 different questions. First, what does the team that answers to you? You have a specific committee, or how does that work?
So I have a team, and it changes a lot from, orchestra to orchestra. I think it's generally the same. So my boss is the chief artistic officer. So he's talking high level, very big picture things for the orchestra. And then my position as artistic general manager is the future planning and focusing on making sure everything happens in the day-to-day. That from month to month we're doing what we need to be doing as a team. So I've got operations underneath me. So I have a stage manager who reports to me, and the stagehands, they report to him. They have had a long relationship, and I don't like to pretend I manage the stagehands. I don't. I do deal with personnel issues if they come up. If there's an issue with the stagehands or something, they all come to me to discuss, just in case. And then if it is beyond me, then I go to my boss. It's kind of a typical reporting structure that if things start to go over my head a little bit, that I can't make these kinds of decisions, then I start to engage my boss. And then there's also education. So the education department is rolled in with artistic. There is a director of education, so he and I are kind of lateral, but we work together because he's not a musician, and which is rare, but so we work very closely together because there is that disconnect. It's important that I'm aware of everything that's happening because oftentimes he's unaware of how an orchestra is typically working. Mm-hmm. And then personnel is also something, so myself and the director of personnel, we manage the orchestra schedule and getting communication out. So he's the main communicator with all the orchestra. He's the one who produces their schedules and everything, makes sure that they are on time, that they know what to wear, because clothes changes from concert to concert depending on what it is. So and then I have an artistic team that is made up of an artistic operations manager and then an artistic coordinator. I don't have a coordinator right now. He left us just before COVID, and we haven't hired the position because obviously we don't need it. But the artistic coordinator primarily handles all the guest artist relations, so booking flights, scheduling hotels, all of that kind of stuff, the very nitty-gritty details of the guest artists and conductors. And then the artistic operations manager focuses on back of house with our stage manager, but also all these extra things we do, audio recording with the orchestra, editing some audio content, things like that. He also works in operations to help supplement anything with the stagehands and that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. And then the less cheery question of how has your day-to-day changed since COVID?
So I'm obviously working at home. It's not great. It brings its challenges. Communication, it's very easy to drop communication during times like this because it's very easy when you're in the office to go down the hall and just ask a question, or, when you're in person with people, it's very different. So now primarily I'm just really at home all day. But We've done some concerts, so I've been on site we've performed at Red Rocks this summer, so I've been on site for those concerts. We are in the process of getting it back in the hall right now. Our hall is owned by the city, it's not ours, so we have to work with them on the protocols and everything to get the orchestra back. The biggest issue is the winds and brass. So primarily right now, I'm in a lot of Zoom meetings, as you can imagine. My calendar is honestly more full these days just because we're all having to connect so much more. So, you know, I'm usually on calls from 10 a.m. till 4. I've now made it a point that I exercise every day because I have to for my mental being, because it's easy to get sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss my job, you know, and my job is kind of a hybrid of things right now. I'm still managing lots of schedules and things like that, but the projects are very like last minute because we don't know what's possible right now. We're all working in a really weird environment of trying to figure out what we can and cannot do and how we can do it safely. So yeah, we're trying to be creative. We're coming up with new concerts and things that we can do in a safe way. The weather's turning here, you know, it's starting to get colder, so soon enough we won't be able to be outside anymore, which is frustrating. So that's why we're pushing so hard to get indoors. So yeah, I'm in my house a lot.
So both pre and during COVID, what are some of the softwares that you turn to, like Daytoday?
So that's a loaded question for me here. They don't have the things I wish they had in Colorado. So in Baltimore, we had a program called Arts Vision, which I'm pretty sure you've heard about. Arts Vision is an incredible piece of software that is created for performing arts organizations. It can do everything from schedule the orchestra to assigning personnel and creating rosters and all that kind of stuff. And not only that, but keeping a very thorough archive. Here, the Colorado Symphony primarily uses Microsoft 365. We use SharePoint for for documents, basically of just archiving and keeping our documents. We also use a lot of Dropbox right now for archiving content. It's not great, but in terms of that, it's not anything that nobody else uses. Office 365. I use a lot of Excel to budget. I use a lot of Word documents to put together programs. I wish I had Arts Vision, but we don't. So.
Can you tell me about your proudest moment in this organization?
In this organization?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't quite had my proudest moment yet. It's weird to say that because, of course, there's got to be something. Mm-hmm. And they all run together, you know, that I'm very proud of the person I hired for the artistic operations position here. He started the day we got quarantined, but he's been the exact right person at the exact right time. I take teams very seriously. I think you are nothing without a good team. I can be really good at my job. And don't get me wrong, I am. But you are nothing without your colleagues. And having a really good team is important. I would say one of my proudest moments, one of the best concerts I've brought to this orchestra and I think is important was I had Cynthia Erivo here. It was a push to get her here because people didn't think it would do well. But I heard her. She was in Baltimore and I heard her sing at one of our gala concerts there. And I said, we need to get her here. You guys will be blown away. And that concert resonates still with me. It was in February, so it was just before our shutdown. It was just an incredible show. And I was proud to be part of that. I was proud to have brought it here. But it's hard, Tenacious D was with the orchestra at Red Rocks last year with Jack Black. So that was cool. They run together. It's hard. The highs are high and the lows are super low, and working in this business. But really, one of the best moments I've had recently was just hearing the orchestra get back together at Betcher, which is our hall. This was in the summer. It was the first time in like 4 months we'd heard the orchestra, and it was just a small string group, but I cried like an infant. It was very emotional because after so many years of being in a performing arts organization and taking advantage of hearing a professional orchestra all the time, it was very easy to forget that what we do is we're very lucky. that I love my job. It's hard and it's not always perfect, but yeah, I missed hearing them because inevitably that's what I do this for. And so when I heard them play again, that was, it was nice to hear it. It was beautiful. So it's a long answer and I don't really think I touched on anything particularly inspiring, but.
That's okay. And then, could you tell me about your biggest failure and what you learned from it?
Yeah, it wasn't here. That's immediate. So in Baltimore, we did a show called Pulse. It was a collaborative concert with a contemporary band. It was just a non-classical symphonic artist. And it was, in this particular case, it was, oh my God, why am I forgetting her name? Oh my God, you think I would remember this? Her name, my mind is so full right now. Oh my God, this is gonna drive me crazy. Oh my God, hold on, I'm gonna Google it because now I feel like a moron, but. Come on, my computer is being ridiculously slow today. Esperanza Spalding. God damn it, that's embarrassing. So it was Esperanza Spalding. I had gotten the agreement all settled with them to do this concert. About 2 weeks before the show, I forget why, I think I was putting together maybe the final payment for her. I was going through the contract and I noticed that the one thing I did not discuss with them was the live stream. That was a key part of this concert, was that we live streamed the concert on radio, on our local radio station. And that happened for every concert we'd ever done. It was like now at this point, 15 shows of Pulse that they'd done over the last few years, and this is now the first one where I was like, oh my God. Like I didn't even mention it. I just forgot. I just forgot. And I'm really grateful for the manager I had, because I had 3 bosses in Baltimore. 2 sucked, 1 was great. And thankfully I had the good boss at this moment, because if I had anybody else, I think it would have been way more emotional. But it still resonates with me because I remember it so much. I remember that moment of just being like, oh my God, I didn't remember to put this in the contract. So I had to go to her and say, I don't know what to do. I tried to fix it first. That's my first go-to. Everybody wants to try and fix it. And maybe sometimes you can't. And it's happened where I've forgotten something and people are flexible. She was not flexible. She was not going to do the live broadcast. She said, absolutely not. And I was like, cool. So I had to go to my boss and said, I'm really sorry. I missed this on the contract. She won't do the live broadcast. It was fine. I mean, it didn't feel fine at the time, but you live and learn. I was early in my career, and that sucked, because it didn't happen. We didn't do the live broadcast. I felt like an idiot because we had live broadcasted every other show, and here we were on that concert and didn't get to. It was a great show too. It was awesome. But anyway, yeah, that was a particularly bad moment. And anytime the orchestra goes into overtime, that hurts. It happened, because inevitably, as the person who puts the programs together, it does fall on me, because things happen and schedules, people talk longer than you want them to, or, and all of a sudden you go 1 second into, past that time, it's $2,500 that you did not anticipate spending. So that's happened a few times, and it will happen to every artistic planning person in their career, because you can't control everybody as much as you want to.
You touched on contracts. How involved are you with making the contract or negotiating the collective bargaining agreement?
150%, I do all of it.
Oh, wow.
I do. I negotiate, and I usually have my artistic coordinator write the contracts that come from us, and I review them, because I don't want to particularly write 150 contracts with you. And I did that, I already went through that in my career where I was the one who wrote all of them. So now I'm kind of like, I'm in this position and somebody else can write them. So right now though, it's me, but we're not doing a ton of contracting because there's not any guest artists. So, but yes, I am the one who negotiates and finalizes every detail of every contract. And I have to read the ones that come to me that are 25 pages when you're talking about a Harry Potter film, and you have to read every single one of those babies just to make sure you're not getting screwed over. So yes, that's me.
Wow. How do you think the industry is going to change post-COVID?
I think you're going to see a lot more streaming. I think musicians are going to start realizing that that the old ways are not going to make it anymore. Because orchestra musicians, and I don't actually mean that here, our musicians here are fantastic. They're flexible, they're willing to try new things. But a lot of orchestras in the country have very old school musicians who are in an old school world who do not understand that things are changing. And they have been for many years. Pre-COVID, it's been going this way. And I think you're gonna see, I think if an orchestra wants to succeed, they're going to have to change with the times. Classical music has always been behind in history. You're always behind. You know, when you talk about Impressionism, we're like so many years off of artistic, of the visual art, or, Impressionism. Like, it doesn't make any, we're always just behind the times in the sense of how things are changing. But, and it's the same with kind of how we're dealing with technology. Musicians just, they have not figured out how to get on board. And not only that, but how to be creative. Some orchestras now are being very creative about how they're moving forward right now, because in some orchestras just shut the doors. And that will show you what orchestras will succeed and which won't. Nashville, unfortunately, great orchestra, they shut the doors the entire year. They just said, we're done. We're not paying anybody, we're done. That shows, they're struggling financially. We all are, but they do have a very large deficit. That it's been known in the business for many years that they do. But yeah, they just weren't willing. The board was not willing to let the staff and the musicians be creative about how to move forward. Whereas here, we have a very supportive board who just desires our creativity. We're doing a food and music concert on Sunday at a very high-end restaurant in town. I've been wanting to do something like this for years, and I'm so excited that we're doing it now. So it's just, you have to be flexible, and it's hard because honestly, I am not a very flexible individual. I like my plans. I like my calendar. I like my schedule. I like how I do things in a very orderly manner. So it's been frustrating for me because and it'll be good for my career. I'm going to learn to be more flexible because things change. Things are changing daily. Every day we find something new and we have to shift, so tomorrow we may find out, okay, you can get back in the hall with the winds and brass, and we're like, okay, and like we have to then make it happen, quickly. So it's, those who are willing to be flexible and creative will succeed. Those who are just refusing to acknowledge the situation, they'll fail, and it'll be apparent.
Yeah. Wow. Ooh. Okay. So moving into like an employment section, like what advice would you give someone that wants to go into your position?
Oh, I love this question. You need to be somebody, and I mean this wholeheartedly, you need to be somebody who is absolutely passionate about the job and what it means, because you are working on a non-COVID, and honestly, it's been like this really during COVID as well. You're on all the time, vacation time, it kind of happens. Yes, you can get away. It's hard. And you have to be willing to accept that you may not always get a perfect day on vacation. The only time that I was really ever truly away from work was during my honeymoon. I got married last summer, and I did actually, I did answer some emails during my honeymoon, but nobody bothered me. Nobody like pestered me. But during normal operating time and it's very, very, very difficult to get away. And you need to be okay with that. You need to love it that much that it's okay for you. You have to be willing to cancel things for work because you love it and it's important to you. Some people, depending on who you are, one of the things I've struggled with during COVID is that my identity is surrounded about my job. Mm-hmm. And personally, I am okay with that because that's how I choose to live my life. I have created a more healthy work-life balance here in Colorado, which I'm very happy about, because I did not have that in Baltimore. You know, I take care of myself, I work out daily. I wanted a better balance, and I've created that for myself. But I also, you know, I've canceled workouts because I've got to get something done, and that's more important to me. So you have to be kind of a workaholic. And you got to be, and the other thing is, if you want to be in this position, particularly and doing artistic, you have to be willing to get on the phone. Millennials, we don't like the phone. You know, we don't like calling people. I can't say that about myself now because I've developed this skill where I actually enjoy calling people. I'm also an extrovert, so that helps. But, you know, millennials shy away from making phone calls. You know, I had my artistic coordinator before, you know, the one who left right before COVID, he would never get on the phone. You would never call anybody. Like, to get an answer quickly, that's what you have to do. And sometimes you need an answer now. And yeah, so I would say that's definitely a piece. You gotta be willing to talk to people on the phone. There's a lot more. You have to be very organized, like to a T. You know, people are counting on you to have all the details, everything laid out. You have to have thought of almost everything. You know, you have to know what the instrumentation is of the programs you put together, because that's going to affect how personnel hires people. And if you put something wrong, you know, maybe somebody will catch it, maybe somebody won't. So you have to be perfect 99% of the time. And don't get me wrong, as I've shared, I've made many a mistake. So it's not, you know, the end of the world. I have lived to always tell the tale later. Nothing. And the other thing is, I would always tell people everything is negotiable. You can always find a compromise. You will not always make everybody happy in every given situation. Musicians can be very difficult with the contract, the CBA, but there's always, I have yet in this point in the last 7-8 years, never been able to find a compromise. It may not benefit everybody to the extent they wanted to, but at least it works for everybody. So know that there may not always be exactly what you expect, but you can find a compromise in everything.
Is there anything that you wish you'd known more about before going into this?
Contracts, the CBA, and how serious they are. It is not a joke. When I got into Baltimore, I was shocked. I was just absolutely astounded as to what I had to deal with that orchestra in the contract with the union. It is very, and not only that, not only with the musicians, but the stagehands. You're dealing with that and the stagehands union, IATSE. So I wish I would have known more. Seriously, of course I knew about it, you know, like it would be a ridiculous masters if nobody said, hey, by the way, most major orchestra, you know, every major orchestra in the country is a union and you're going to need to deal. Of course I knew that. But to the extent at which it dictates every single thing I do, I wish I would have known. Because I mean, in Baltimore, it was much more intense than it is here, I think. I know it was just that was the Bible. The contract was just, you worked with it. Our musicians, again, they're more flexible here. I mean, it might be an East Coast, West Coast mentality. I don't know, but it's also just tradition. You know, the East Coast, obviously they're just professional all up and down. The New England is just very traditional. You know, they're a very traditional classical orchestra. We in Colorado, we're very different here. Just how we run and how we work. And yeah, but I would have loved to have known more about contracts.
How did you mitigate that? Did you just learn from experience? Did you take another class?
Learn by screwing up, honestly. Every time I made a mistake, I learned the contract. You know, when I started scheduling the orchestra in Baltimore, that was the trickiest thing was, you know, I was the one who managed the calendar, and the calendar was so specific. You couldn't schedule rehearsal Sundays. Some days you had to be off. You had to have like certain days off in a row during the year, a certain amount. It was crazy. You could only perform on, I can't even remember now, which is great because I'm glad I got rid of it, but it was like 12 Sundays of the year. You could only perform, that's it. And you had to manage all that. You had to know all those rules. And so basically I learned by doing it and not only that, but making mistakes. So, you know, and know that like those kinds of mistakes, you know, your colleagues will help, you know, like the director of personnel, she'd been there for many years. And so when I was working on the calendar, she and I would get together and she'd be like, there's one extra Sunday we need to get rid of. And I'm like, damn it, you know? And so those kinds of things you realize quickly, but I'm my toughest critic. And I think everybody believes that is that you're your own toughest critic, but nobody can make me feel as bad as I do when I make mistakes. You know, my boss, they can read me out. They will still not make me feel worse than what I do to myself. Personally, it's how I deal with it, but you know what? It's been working for me, and I don't make many mistakes twice.
Oh, okay. And then the last thing I have is, what's the process for getting hired to where you are?
Oh, honestly, I've got to tell you, all my positions I've been hired because of who I knew. So that is something I recommend to anybody, is that the relationships you make in your internships and the things you do, and you know, you talking to me, you're making a relationship here. Those are important because they'll help you find a job. If they see your work and they recognize that you're that you're good at what you do, you'll get hired, because don't get me wrong, there are a lot of bad administrators in this world. A lot of them. Majority of people in this business are bad. And there are very few good ones. And so if you're good, people recognize it. Managers recognize it. Your colleagues will recognize it. And then the musicians recognize it. I mean, Jonathan Carney and Brevard recognized my talent. He knew I just had that kind of spark to do this work, which is how I got my first job. Again, I didn't write a cover letter for that job. I didn't write a cover letter for this job because I worked with my boss on a commission for Kevin Putz. And Linda Martyr, who is a manager at a boutique managing firm, I've been working very closely with her. She was somebody who was encouraging me to get out of Baltimore. And so when I told her about Colorado, her artist was music director here. It still is. And so she's like, I'm going to call them and I'm going to tell them to hire you. And she did. She absolutely did. And I was offered the job a week after asking about it. I had to send in an updated resume. That was the extent of it. So the process is, I wouldn't say it's really formal. My experience in this has just been from knowing people and from looking for jobs and just reaching out. The job was taken off the website for Colorado. They were no longer looking for anybody, but I still wrote because I really wanted to do this. The idea of living in Colorado was I loved it. My husband hated it in Baltimore. I knew we had to leave because, my job situation wasn't great. He hated it. I wanted to make us happy. And so, yeah, that's how that worked for me. Sometimes the process is much more formal. You're going to write a cover letter and a resume. You're going to interview with, maybe your boss, and then you'll interview with the team, and then you'll interview with more people, and then they'll offer you the job. I did come to Colorado for a day of interviews. I interviewed with all of senior staff, basically. Nobody else. That was it. But it was kind of a formality because I was offered the job that day. So he already knew he was going to offer me the job. So it's different from person to person and job to job. But there are some that'll be more formal. Then if you know somebody, it's going to be a little more relaxed. You may not write a cover letter. You may just have to update your resume. Again, I don't know what I'm going to do when I need to write a cover letter. So I don't know how to do it.
Okay, well, that's all my questions. Do you have any more wisdom, or if you want to plug the symphony?
Oh, yeah, the Colorado Symphony is awesome. I'm curious what this is all for. Like, what are you doing with all, and who have you, have you talked to other people? What are you doing?
Well, so far you're my first interview. I'm just trying to get best practices because I'm graduating with my master's from arts admin in December. Trying to get contacts because I had a plan for trying to get a job and then COVID, so it's just want to learn more about it because I come from a music ed bachelor's, so I was completely new to arts admin. I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, good. I think what you're doing is really great. I think informational interviews are the best thing you can do. You learn a lot from those of us in the business who do it. And so, keep in touch. I wish you tons of luck. If I ever have a job or if I hear something, I'll certainly let you know.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, no, I don't think I have anything, but appreciate you reaching out. I think it's great I think it's really great that you're doing this. It shows a lot of initiative. I think that's awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me.
Happy to do it.
Okay, I will see you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for watching and or listening. And if you're interested, there are more episodes and interviews on the same platform that you found this one, including a summary episode at the main end of the series going over differences we may have found and overall best practices for operations managers in the nonprofit field. So stay tuned. Thank you. Goodbye.